The emergency HOA meeting was standing room only, a rare occurrence in Sunnyside Estates. Karen stood at the podium, laser pointer in hand, clicking through a PowerPoint presentation titled Neighborhood Aesthetic Integrity, a Crisis. As you can see, Karen gestured to a hastily taken photo of Martin's property. What began as a simple hedge has morphed into an eyesore that threatens our property values and community standards. Martin sat quietly in the back row, arms crossed. He had come prepared, with copies of the bylaws, his approved landscaping forms, and, most importantly, signatures from 23 neighbors who rather enjoyed the whimsical addition to the neighborhood. The board motion is simple, Karen continued, her voice crisp with authority. All landscape features must maintain traditional suburban aesthetic values. No mazes, no topiaries shaped like animals, no. She paused dramatically, creative interpretations of our standards. When public comment opened, Martin approached the microphone. While I appreciate the board's concern, he began calmly. I'd like to submit evidence that my landscape project is not only compliant with our bylaws, but has actually increased interest in our neighborhood. He held up a local newspaper. The Sunnyside Sentinel has requested to feature my property in their innovative landscaping section. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Karen's tight smile faltered slightly. Furthermore, Martin continued, I've collected signatures from nearly half our residents who support creative landscaping options. He placed the petition on the table. Many have expressed that our regulations have become overly restrictive. Karen's eyes narrowed as she snatched up the petition. This is not about creativity, Mr. Chen. This is about maintaining standards. Standards that protect all of our investments. Funny you should mention investments, Martin replied. I've taken the liberty of researching property values in HOAs with more flexible landscaping policies versus those with restrictive ones. He distributed a graph showing higher property appreciation in neighborhoods with moderate regulations. It seems that allowing some individuality actually increases neighborhood desirability. The meeting ended in deadlock, with the board promising to review all materials and evidence before making a final determination. The next morning, Karen's doorbell rang at precisely 7:15 am. No one was there, but a small potted topiary shaped like a maze sat on her porch with a card. Thought you might want to practice. Neighborhood maze-a-thon planned for next Saturday. All proceeds to the Sunnyside Elementary School garden project. By noon, Karen had received 17 calls from neighbors asking if she'd be participating in the charity event. By afternoon, the local news had picked up the story. Suburban neighborhood turns landscaping dispute into charity goldmine. That evening, Karen stared out her window at the growing line of cars slowly driving by Martin's house. People were taking photos. Children were laughing as parents led them through the expanding maze that now took up his entire front yard. Her phone buzzed with a text from the HOA vice president. Channel 5 wants to interview the board about the maze-a-thon. Great publicity opportunity for the neighborhood. You available tomorrow at 9. Karen's fingers tightened around her phone. This was not how things were supposed to go. Martin had somehow turned her complaint into a community celebration. Worse, he had made her look like the villain. She pulled out her HOA violation notebook, flipping through years of meticulously documented infractions. There had to be something she could use, some regulation that would put an end to this nonsense once and for all. As night fell, Karen found herself doing something she'd never done before. She drove to the far side of the neighborhood and parked her car, then walked back, hood up, to Martin's property. The lights were off in his house. Perfect. It was time for a closer inspection of this maze. There had to be a violation somewhere, and she was going to find it, even if it took all night. 6 months later, Sunnyside Estates had become known throughout the region as the Maze neighborhood. What had begun with Martin's driveway deterrent had evolved into a community-wide phenomenon. 7 houses now featured elaborate hedge mazes, each with unique themes and challenges. But none was more popular than Karen's. Welcome to the labyrinth of second chances, Karen announced to a group of wide-eyed elementary school students. She wore overalls and a sun hat, an outfit that would have been unthinkable in her former life. Who can tell me what a labyrinth symbolizes? A small girl raised her hand. A journey. Exactly. Karen beamed. In ancient times, people believed walking a labyrinth could help you find your true path in life. As the children eagerly entered her backyard maze, Martin approached with 2 cups of lemonade. The school principal tells me your maze tours are now officially part of their curriculum, he said, handing her a cup. Philosophy and horticulture combined. Karen accepted the drink with a grateful nod. Who would have thought I'd go from handing out violation notices to teaching children about mythological symbolism through gardening? They watched as the children navigated the maze, their delighted squeals filling the air. Have you heard from the realtor? Martin asked. Karen nodded. 3 more families signed contracts this week. Apparently, living in the maze neighborhood is now a selling point. Property values are up 17%. Ironic that your worst fear turned into the neighborhood's greatest asset, Martin observed. Karen laughed, a full, uninhibited sound that still surprised those who had known her before. The universe has a sense of humor. They strolled toward the center of her maze, where Karen had created a small garden sanctuary. A plaque mounted on a decorative stone read, "Sometimes you need to get lost to find yourself." The HOA board wants you back, you know, Martin mentioned casually. Karen raised an eyebrow. As president? As creative consultant? They're thinking of establishing official maze maintenance guidelines. She snorted. Of course they are. Some things never change. Will you do it? Karen considered, watching a butterfly land on one of her hedges. Only if the first guideline is that there are no rigid guidelines, just principles, suggestions. As they reached the center of the labyrinth, they found Mrs. Abernathy already seated on one of the benches, her ever-present teacup in hand. "I've been waiting for you too," the elderly woman said with a knowing smile. The council called. They want to feature our neighborhood in the county tourism brochure. Karen shook her head in amazement. All because I couldn't be bothered to walk an extra 45 seconds around Martin's driveway. Sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home, Mrs. Abernathy quoted, eyes twinkling. Later that evening, as twilight descended on Sunnyside Estates, Karen stood at the entrance to Martin's original maze, now expanded and illuminated with subtle garden lights. She closed her eyes, remembering the furious woman who had once stood dripping on this very spot, threatening property value assessments and citation notices. She stepped into the maze without opening her eyes, letting her hand trail along the now familiar hedges, feeling each turn and corner in a path she had memorized not through study, but through the simple act of allowing herself to wander without fear of being lost. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear Martin's voice guiding new visitors, gentle laughter floating through the evening air. From another direction came the sound of children still playing in the community maze that now connected 3 backyards into one grand adventure. Karen opened her eyes, gazing up at the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. The maze had no power over her now, not because she had conquered it, but because she had finally learned to embrace the journey without needing to control every turn. And in that moment, Karen Willoughby, former HOA tyrant, current maze enthusiast, and unlikely neighborhood unifier, realized she had found her way after all. But as she rounded the final corner to the center of Martin's original maze, she found a new path had appeared, one she hadn't noticed before. It beckoned with mystery and possibility. With a smile, Karen chose the unfamiliar route, curious to see where it might lead. Karen Willoughby screamed as the automated sprinkler system erupted beneath her feet, drenching her freshly styled hair and designer pantsuit. Her morning coffee cup went flying, landing with a splash on the immaculate concrete driveway she had been cutting across. This was not how the president of the Sunnyside Estates Homeowners Association had planned to start her Wednesday. "What in heaven's name?" she shrieked, her voice echoing through the quiet morning street as she stood frozen in shock, water streaming down her face. Her mascara began to run in black rivulets down her cheeks. Behind a nearby curtain, Martin Chen watched with barely contained glee. After 6 months of Karen brazenly using his driveway as her personal shortcut to her weekly hair appointment, The simple timer he'd installed on his sprinkler system had finally caught her in the act. 3, 2, 1. Martin whispered, and right on cue, Karen's head snapped toward his house, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Martin!" she bellowed, stomping toward his front door, leaving wet footprints across his perfectly manicured lawn. Another violation she routinely cited others for at HOA meetings. Martin opened his door before she could pound on it. "Good morning, Karen. Oh my, you're soaked. Did you get caught in the rain?" He struggled to keep his expression neutral. "You did this on purpose." Karen jabbed a manicured finger into his chest. "This is harassment. You know I have an important presentation at the city council meeting today. And you know that's my private property you've been cutting across for months?" Martin replied calmly. "I've asked you 3 times to use the sidewalk like everyone else." Karen's face reddened. "It saves me 45 seconds. Do you know how valuable my time is? I run this neighborhood." "Actually, you run the HOA board," Martin corrected, "which makes it even more surprising that you'd repeatedly violate Section 8, Paragraph 3 of our own bylaws about respecting private property boundaries." He handed her a printed copy of the very rules she had helped draft. Karen snatched the paper, crumpled it, and threw it on his porch. "You'll regret this, Martin. The board meeting is next week, and your request for a backyard pergola is on the agenda." She gave him a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'd hate for something so insignificant to affect your property values." As she turned to leave, she called over her shoulder, "And fix those hideous hedges. They're 2 inches over the maximum height regulation." Martin watched her storm away, leaving a trail of water droplets on the sidewalk. He sighed, looking at his perfectly trimmed hedges that lined his driveway. They were exactly at the 48-inch regulation height. He'd measured them himself just yesterday. But as he picked up the crumpled bylaws from his porch, something clicked in his mind. He looked back at his hedges with newfound interest. "Maximum height regulation, huh?" he murmured, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I wonder what the bylaws say about width or configuration." 3 houses down, elderly Mrs. Abernathy, who had been watching the entire scene unfold from her porch swing, raised her teacup in a silent salute to Martin. The Battle of Sunnyside Estates had officially begun. The following Monday, Karen Willoughby Power walked toward Martin's house, her high heels clicking aggressively against the pavement. She was running late for her standing appointment at Curl Up and Dye Salon. And despite last week's sprinkler incident, old habits died hard. Martin's driveway was still the most direct route to save those precious 45 seconds. She slowed as she approached, eyes darting to check if Martin's car was gone. It was. Perfect. What she didn't expect, however, was the sight that greeted her. Where Martin's neatly trimmed hedges had once formed a straight line alongside his driveway, they now curved inward, creating a strange, winding path. New hedges had appeared overnight, extending the original ones but forming odd angles and turns. "What in the world?" Karen muttered, approaching cautiously. She could still see a path through, but it wasn't the straight shot she was accustomed to. Still, she was running late. She checked her watch and made a split-second decision. Karen entered the hedge pathway, moving quickly at first, but soon slowing as the path twisted unexpectedly. Left, then right, then left again. The hedges were tall enough that she couldn't see over them, and thick enough that she couldn't push through. "This is ridiculous," she huffed, turning another corner only to find herself facing what appeared to be a dead end. "Martin!" she shouted, but there was no response. She backtracked, taking another turn, but found herself in an unfamiliar section. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway made her freeze. Martin was home. After 10 frustrating minutes of wrong turns, Karen finally emerged from the hedges, disheveled and 15 minutes late for her appointment. Martin was casually watering some newly planted greenery. "Lost Karen?" he asked innocently. "What have you done to your yard?" she demanded, brushing leaves from her blouse. This is a violation of something." Martin smiled. "Actually, I checked the bylaws thoroughly. There's no restriction on hedge configuration, only height. These are all exactly 48 inches, regulation height." He patted one of the bushes affectionately. I've developed quite an interest in topiary mazes. Fascinating hobby. Karen's nostrils flared. The HOA will not stand for this monstrosity. The HOA approved my landscaping plan last month, Martin replied, producing a stamped document. You even signed it yourself, though I admit the drawing might not have conveyed the full experience. Karen snatched the paper, scanning it with growing fury. Indeed, there was her signature on a diagram that, viewed from above, could be interpreted as the beginnings of a maze. She had approved dozens of landscaping requests that day, barely glancing at them. This isn't over, she hissed, thrusting the paper back at him. As Karen stormed off, now significantly late for her appointment, Martin noticed something she'd dropped in the maze, a small notebook. Flipping it open, he found a meticulously detailed list of every minor infraction in the neighborhood, organized by address, with his name circled in red at the top. Beside his name was a note: special attention needed, potential troublemaker. That evening, the HOA email list received a surprising announcement. An emergency board meeting had been called for Wednesday night. The sole agenda item: discussion of appropriate landscaping aesthetics and property value preservation. Martin read the email twice, then walked to his front window, looking at his budding maze with determination. If Karen wanted a war, he would give her one, hedge by hedge. The evening of the neighborhood maze-a-thon arrived with unexpected fanfare. Local businesses had set up booths, 3 food trucks lined the curb, and a banner stretched across Sunnyside Drive: Get lost for a good cause. Martin's maze had tripled in size, now stretching across his entire front yard with elaborate twists and turns. Karen was conspicuously absent. Has anyone seen Karen? Asked Diane from the HOA board, clipboard in hand. She's supposed to cut the ribbon in 10 minutes. Martin shrugged, though he couldn't help feeling a twinge of concern. Karen hadn't been seen since yesterday's final board vote, which had not only approved his maze, but had created a new creative landscaping initiative for the neighborhood. I'll check on her, Martin volunteered, walking the 3 blocks to Karen's meticulously maintained colonial. He found her in her backyard, on her knees in the dirt, surrounded by gardening tools and dozens of small hedge plants. Her normally perfect hair was disheveled, dirt smudged her cheek, and she wore, most shocking of all, jeans and a t-shirt. Karen. She looked up, startled. What do you want? Come to bloat? Martin took in the scene. What are you doing? What does it look like? She gestured at a crude drawing beside her. I'm planning my own maze. It's going to be better than yours. More complex. More meaningful. She pointed to different sections of her drawing. This part represents the journey of life. This section symbolizes the challenges of leadership. And this, she indicated a particularly convoluted section. This is for all the times I've been misunderstood. Martin stared, momentarily speechless. The ribbon cutting is in 10 minutes. Everyone's waiting for you. Karen blinked, as if emerging from a trance. I'm not going. They can start without me. What happened, Karen? She sat back on her heels, looking at her dirt-covered hands. I went into your maze 2 nights ago to find violations, she admitted, but I got lost. Really lost. I was in there for 3 hours. Martin's eyes widened. 3 hours. It's not that big. I know. That's what I kept telling myself. But every turn looked the same in the dark. I started panicking then. I sat down and just breathed. She looked up at him. And I realized something. I haven't slowed down in 15 years. Not since I became HOA president. Not since Richard left. Martin hesitantly sat on a garden bench. What did you realize? That I've been controlling everything because I couldn't control the things that really mattered. She gestured around her perfect yard. All this, it's just been my way of creating order in my life. She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. I'm resigning from the HOA board. What? Karen, that's not. No, it's time. I need to get lost for a while. Figure out who I am without all the rules and regulations. She looked at her crude maze outline. But first, I'm building this, not to compete with yours, but because for the first time in years, I'm excited about creating something instead of just enforcing rules about what others create. Martin studied her face, seeing genuine transformation. The maze-a-thon doesn't need to start with you cutting a ribbon. It could start with you being the first one to go through it. A slow smile spread across Karen's face. Not the tight, controlled smile he was accustomed to, but something genuine. I'd like that. As they walked back toward the event together, Karen asked quietly, "Do you think people would help me with my maze too? I have the design, but I've never actually planted anything myself before." Martin laughed. "Karen, I think you're about to discover that this neighborhood has been waiting years for you to ask for help instead of giving orders.